Okay, hey, welcome to another episode of On the Wrist from Off the Cuff. Today we have a great review for you from the brand Junghans. Now, a little bit about them. They're a German brand with roots going all the way back to 1861 within both the clock and watchmaking industry. Now, this particular type of watch, I'd consider it an everyday dress watch. Some key common characteristics and design language when you're looking for something within this genre. Of course, you're going to be looking for those clean, classic, minimalist designs, and you're going to want something that's very sensibly sized. Now, this is the Max Bill Automatic with the Sapphire crystal, and it's really one of horology's most recognizable designs from celebrated Swiss designer Max Bill, who helped found the Bauhaus design school and established their timeless aesthetic. So I don't feature too many dress watches on the channel because I don't wear a lot of dress watches. I think it's really interesting that dress watches kind of used to be the norm, the de facto wristwatch. It was most people had dress watches and some people had sports watches because they were really into sports. Now you'll find that most people do typically wear sports watches, and the dress watch is more relegated to actual kind of dressy attire. The thing that I really love about this Junghans is that it's so versatile. It's something that can absolutely be worn very casually with a flannel, but also I could see it right and place if you were, in some type of business formal situation or even a formal situation, in the right context. So for me, this is something that I've really fallen in love with. And if you guys are big fans of the channel, you know that I'm a big diver guy. I'm a big kind of everyday outdoor adventure watch type of guy as of late. But there's something just very special about this watch that has really engaged me, and I'm looking forward to sharing with you guys. So with that said, let's go ahead, zoom the camera out, get this piece in hand, and take a closer look. Okay, so as you can see, this is a very unique piece. And I know for some of you, you're probably saying, no, that looks like every other watch of this type that's out there. But the reason why it looks probably like so many of those other watches is because of a very deliberate effort on their part to recapture really what emanates out of this watch in terms of its design, simplicity, level of legibility, and just overall symmetry in terms of its design language. It's a very special piece, and I know that the very cool thing is it's, I guess, akin to the Rolex Submariner in that it's been so influential in the design of so many other watches now that it almost doesn't stand out in the crowd as much as it did when it was first kind of released. And it's a very, such an interesting piece, and it's something I've always had my eye on, but I was always kind of hesitant because of the lack of sapphire crystal. So now that they've been able to offer that, and man, is it executed beautifully, guys. There's really no compromise when you're getting the sapphire here. Look at that beautiful dome. It's not like they replaced it with a flat sapphire or anything like that. This thing is just gorgeous. Look at that. The visual play is outstanding. You can see, if you look closely there as well, there's a slight curvature to the dial at the ends and also to the handset. So in terms of aligning as you're setting the time and you're doing your time hack, you can do that very precisely, which is not always the case with a dressy watch. Sometimes they don't even have a full 60-minute index. They'll just have, let's say, hour markers. And if you're trying to set the time in between those points, you really have no way of knowing, exactly where that's going to lay. Or, on the other side, maybe it didn't even have a seconds hand, right? So for me, as a mechanical watch lover, seeing that smooth sweep is really a part of the experience and in terms of what draws me in and attracts me to a timepiece. So these, in terms of pricing, I got this for $13.50. They're listed on Teddy Balthasar's web shop. They do offer price matching and are generally open to offer discounts similar to the more standard brick and mortar authorized dealers, which I thought was really cool. I sent them a price to match. It was a Joma shop price, and they were very quick to say, hey, they're not an authorized dealer, so we're not going to match that, but we can offer you, 15% off. Hopefully, I'm not upsetting anybody by that. I don't know. I can't promise that whoever will talk to you will come back with a 15% off offer. So I guess technically I didn't pay $13.50 for it. But there was no context in terms of, oh, hey, I have a YouTube channel and I'm going to review this. Obviously, Teddy has a huge following and doesn't need my videos plugging his shop. So just to give you some honest and candid feedback that, yeah, it was like a brick and mortar authorized dealer in that, yes, they are, kind of typically those list level prices, but they are, pretty happy to, it seemed like, to work with you and offer you a discount, something realistic, of course. And when I kind of cross shopped that discount, it was honestly better than some of the other gray market. I mean, apart from Joma Shop, of course, but some of the other gray market listings that I saw from other reputable dealers. So I thought that was cool. And for me, it's absolutely worth the price. I'm always going to be looking for a discount because I just have too many watches. So some of you are on that same boat with me, and some of you are not. Maybe some of you are like, cool, I'll just pay that, and this will be my 1 or 2 watches. And I think this absolutely fits that bill. The size of it has been something that, concerned me as well, right? Apart from, hey, plexiglass, and even though it has this coating and everything. So I was always kind of worried about that. But thanks to another dealer, which is Watch Buys, and when they do kind of their road show and in-house thing, I was able to see these in person. So I'm a huge fan of 38 millimeter diameter watches of this style in terms of kind of the everyday non-sports watch. But since it's 38 millimeters, but the dial is so expansive, I was kind of worried that it might actually wear too large. And that's crazy to think about, right? A 38 millimeter watch wearing too large on my 7.25 and sometimes 7.5 inch wrist, depending on how high or low I wear it. Sometimes I'll wear them on the wrist bone, some I'll wear them above the wrist bone. I tend to wear this one above the wrist bone from that perspective. But that 38 millimeter diameter did worry me. But I will say that because of the way that the dial is so perfectly spaced, right? Because you have that outer track, and then you have, of course, these the batons, those hour markers, and then at the end of them you have the actual numerals. What that does is it creates a visual point of focus closer to the center of the dial. So although the dial is very expansive, it doesn't feel oversized by any means. And then another thing, of course, that helps is that although it is very thin, it's only 10 millimeters thick, even including that beautiful high dome vintage crystal. The nice thing is because of that saucer shape, it actually helps it not. I mean, can you imagine if it was flat? It might actually look a little oversized, but because of that roundness and that dome, it carries the weight and balances it more, right? So that's one thing that I was really pleasantly surprised with when I saw these in the flesh, is how well balanced it looked for a watch that's 38 millimeters but and wide and 10 millimeters thick. And then another piece that's very unique, I think, about this particular model is that it really has short lug to lugs, 40 millimeter lug to lug. So the lug to lug distance is how wide some watches are. And that's just so it has very short, compact lugs. It's a near lugless design. And I will say, in terms of its contemporaries, from the likes of Nomos or Stova, those watches typically, within that Bauhaus aesthetic, are going to have quite long lugs. So that is one point here, and one aspect that I think goes very underappreciated is the very short lug to lug distance. And you'll see when we get to the wrist shots how that affects the aesthetic while it's on the wrist. So there's a lot of different dimensions at play here. So if you have been on the fence about this piece because of just the on paper dimensions, hopefully this video will help you get a better idea of how it'll actually feel for you in real life. So with that said, let's actually get this piece on wrist, see how it wears, and get into some more of these details. All right, guys, as you can see on my 7¼ wrist, this thing wears really beautifully. So although you do have that large expansive dial, again, the very, very short lug to lug distance actually helps it wear very centered and very compact on the wrist. Now this watch with longer lugs, I might not have pulled a trigger because as I even look at this, of course, much closer, kind of in that wristy type frame up there, there's some lens distortion. It makes the dial feel a little bit larger, but as you get more context and away from that, you can see it fits really, really well. Some of you might be looking at this saying, man, that looks huge. Some of you might be looking at this saying, man, that looks tiny and too diminutive, which is kind of the beauty of the collecting game, right? Is everybody has different tastes in terms of what they like to wear, but there's no denying this thing is a stunner on the wrist. Check that out. Look at the way it just sits. I mean, I love a good Seiko in terms of ergonomics and K-shape, but there's something extremely special about this watch. I mean, I own the King Seiko reissue and not the newer one that's coming out. I do have one on the way, but the previous one that was like $3,000, and it's a beautiful watch and I love it, and it fits within a similar genre as this watch, but I do find myself gravitating towards this watch, which is interesting. Although it's not cheap it's not the cheapest Bauhaus style of watch you can get. There are absolutely more affordable options out there, but this is probably the best balance in terms of this is the real deal, and also an affordable icon in itself. It's not imitating anything. It is just continuing that line of excellence. And this pale silver dial is fantastic. I know a lot of people will say, oh, that's a white dial. I'd say it's that kind of more opaline silver. It's just very pale, and it does render visually white, in most lighting conditions. And I think it looks great. And it makes it very, very versatile because you can make the dial feel a little bit warmer, let's say with a brown strap, or you can make it feel a little bit cooler with something like a blue or a black strap in terms of the tones that are going to pick up on the dial itself. Now, that bezel-less design is really fantastic. Of course, you're not going to get a screw down crown. It's unsigned, so there's those little things that some people might just have in their head in terms of check boxes that they're looking for. But I mean, would you even want to sign this crown? I mean, it's a fully polished case with a polished crown. So for me, it fits. It fits the aesthetic. It's the way that it was done. It's not like they dialed it back and cheapened anything out. That's just the way that these watches are made. In terms of the movement that's inside, it's your automatic J800.1, which is essentially going to be an ETA 2824 or Sellita SW200 base, depending. I've seen both in terms of, what people kind of report is on the inside of these watches. And then I've seen, of course, different press outlets just regurgitate what's inside based off of the unit that they had. But I've seen reports of both movements. I have no problem with that. And I'm sure that's why Junghans decided to use an in-house name so they'd have the versatility in terms of replacing that movement as different supply chains can dry up or open up. You guys saw that solid case back, so it's not like anything's on display anyway. The stepped bevel, though, on this date window is just beautifully done. So even when you're at an angle, you're not going to see any unsightly kind of open gaps or anything. It feels tailored. It feels trim. It feels taut. And, that's the whole watch is tailored, trim, taut, and purposeful, which I can really dig. And you know, although it's not a sports watch, it does have lume. It has, of course, loomed hour and minute hands, and then it actually does have a lume at those cardinal points, the 12, 3, 6, and 9. It does also have 30 meters of water resistance, which, hey, you know, you're going to wash your hands, get a little splash. Don't worry about it. You'll be fine. But of course, this is not something I would physically take and put 30 meters under the water. It's just not how that stuff works, because a static drop, right? Like, hey, could I put this in a bowl of water? Would it be sealed? Sure. But I mean, realistically, you're not dropping your watch not on your wrist down into bodies of water. If you were going to go into a body of water, you would have to swim, and this would be on your wrist, and you thrashing around would essentially affect the level of water pressure on that timepiece. So yes, 30 meters, completely serviceable. Would it be cool if it had 100 meters, and would it give me more peace of mind? Yes. But for 30, I have no problem with that. 30, that's honestly pretty standard for a dress watch, and the bezel-less design, and you know, the screw in case back, you know, they do make me feel like that is appropriate for this type of watch. It has 20 millimeter lugs. This black strap is actually really nice. It's nothing special in terms of the material, right? It's genuine leather, but it's not Horween or anything like that. But you could easily upgrade because it does have a 20 millimeter lug width. But I find this one to be really nice. It has a slight taper down to 18 millimeters, and it does have nicely signed hardware, fully polished, which perfectly matches the case there. I'm down on to the third from the end hole there, so it's nice and tidy in terms of the extra tongue. There's nothing sticking out, which is great. So I was pleasantly surprised by just how, you know, wearable and serviceable this strap is. It's definitely doing the job. It has this nice outer shell, and then it's kind of a softer, more supple interior, which feels great on the wrist. And I think the more subdued taper actually tie into kind of the straight lines. I think if you go with something a little bit more tapering, it gives it more of an impression of dressing it up a little bit more, looking more refined, as well as more vintage. For me, this gives it a more contemporary and you know, timeless look versus a vintage classic, very specific aesthetic. So with that said, let's go ahead, get some loom shots, low light transition, and closing thoughts. Okay, let's go ahead and hit the lights here. Hey, as you can see, yes, you have loom, and it absolutely does everything that it needs to do. You have, of course, orientation to the 12 o'clock because you get the double pip up there, and then you get those single points at 3, 6, and 9, and then of course you're getting the hour and minutes as well. Now, you don't really need much more than that. It's not like you need the running seconds, because you need to, you know, ensure your watch is running while you're diving. So I'm not worried about that at all, and I think it does the job. Would it be cool if there was more loom? Yeah, I get excited about loom like everybody else does. But at the end of the day, it wouldn't really suit the aesthetic of this watch, right? This thing has to look great in the daylight as well in the dark. So there's always going to be those types of trade-offs. And you'll find today that because so many watches are just based off of spec, that ultimately they end up kind of sacrificing both ends. You know, they'll want something to be a bit overdone, which this is a restrained and purposeful watch in those perspectives. And I like to work in low light transition because you're not always going to be out in the middle of a field enjoying direct sunlight. Often you'll be, you know, coming in and out of buildings, walking underneath overhangs, the shade of a tree, or maybe just spending time in your favorite automobile. So you want to see how these colors, textures, and finishes render in less than optimal lighting. And yeah, we'll even get into some harsh lighting conditions here, as you can see, with a very high contrast that typically would expose any types of defects or anything like that within the finish, or those beautiful textures. And here you're gonna just see the light play with a very handsome timepiece. There's really not much to read off of this, of course, because it doesn't have a brushed bracelet where we're going to be looking at, how uniform the light glides over the brushing. We're going to be really more so paying attention to how this piece, how legible it is, even in less than optimal lighting. Check that out. Does it really need more lume? Because you can absolutely still tell the time with just barely a touch of lighting, because of the way that this piece really plays with that light. So guys, I've been very taken by this watch, and I've really appreciated taking you on a journey into my thoughts on it. But in terms of closing thoughts, guys, on the wrist, it wears just perfectly. It's very compact, but it has plenty of wrist presence with that large, expansive all-dial layout. But then it's offset by the short, stubby lugs, helping balance those proportions. And then, of course, you do get that nice high dome. So when you're looking at it from a side profile as well, it's not seeming super flat and super wide and large. It fits, and it feels proportional, which is something that I feel like is a word that doesn't get thrown around enough in the design room when it comes to a lot of the watches that are designed today. Now, in terms of model variants, there's tons of different options available in the Max Bill line, so definitely, check those out. For me, this was my pick. I wanted the Sapphire. I wanted the very iconic layout and look of this particular style, so I was happy to finally get this one and add it into the collection. In terms of comparable models, I think iconic status, there really aren't too many that compete with this watch, at least not near this price point. But in terms of kind of historical significance, and put that all aside, the Swatch Group does offer the 38 millimeter Hamilton Intramatic, and the 39 millimeter Mito Baroncelli Heritage, both costing less and packing the more superior ETA 892, which is thinner. But honestly, I would argue that neither of the designs are as perfect, quote unquote, as the Max Bill. I honestly compare this closer to, my $3,000 King Seiko reissue from that perspective, in terms of just kind of the iconography and the feel that it invokes while you're putting it on the wrist, and while it is on the wrist, there's just something, a special connection with it. And those other watches are cool, right? A Hamilton Intramatic, it's a very popular watch. That Baroncelli Heritage, I have one. I freaking love that thing, guys. But it's very, very flat, and it makes it feel at times a little oversized because of the flatness. And I've always been a fan of the Intramatic, but they just haven't had the size combination that would have a sweeping seconds hand. It's like, why have that cooler, more expensive movement if there's no seconds hand connecting you with that level of, mechanic refinement? So ultimately, this is kind of my pick for the ultimate everyday icon and supremely versatile everyday dress watch. This is it. Like, this thing, could it be your one watch? It probably could if you weren't, but honestly, this plus a G-Shock would really get you everything that you're ever going to need. But even this on its own is something special. And I actually do plan to shoot a kind of 3-watch German edition here in the near future. So looking forward to sharing that with you guys. I know I've done some 3-watch segments, with Japanese watches, mainly Seiko. But yeah, this is the stuff. Let me know what you guys think, though. Get in the comments below. Let me know your feedback. What are your thoughts on this very you know, iconic timepiece that actually doesn't get a lot of fanfare, interestingly enough. So with that, thanks for watching, guys. If you like the video, please do hit like, and if you haven't already, please do subscribe for more content just like this. Thanks, guys.